Welcome, everyone. I am really excited to be here today with a longtime family friend, Jessica Dibb. Thank you for your patience. We were having some technological stuff. I know there were a few people waiting eagerly, which I really appreciate. I'm Katy Bray. I'm your host today, and I'm really excited to talk to Jessica about the Enneagram. And I can't wait to share her with everyone because she has been a treasure of our family for many, many years. In fact, I know that she played a huge role in saving my life. Um, when I was much younger, I guess it's been 21 years ago, 20 years ago now. It's amazing how long it's been. Um, and I'm excited too because I don't know that much about the Enneagram. I know a little bit about the Enneagram. So for some of you, I'm going to be learning right alongside you. And I know, Jessica, and we'll get to this later. You have a pioneering way that you're working with the Enneagram that we're going to talk about more in depth. But I'm excited to hear about that. I always
Mm.
I always love when we can take sort of that long standing incredible body of work and advance it into the future and to take it so that it can evolve and grow with us as a species as we develop. And so that has been my sense about what you're doing with it. So I'm really excited to hear about it. And I think there's a class connected to it too, which I'm super excited about. But we'll make sure to cover that towards the end. Um, for anyone who's watching, please feel free to write any questions that you have, whether it's about the Enneagram or anything that we're talking about, and we'll get to the questions that we can. But Jessica, so what I would love to hear first, because you know what, I don't think I know this story. First, thank you for being here today. Really.
It's an honor, really, Katy. And I just want to say, for those that are listening, that it has been an honor to be a longtime family friend. And, you know, if I was able to contribute to your life in the ways that you've said, your mother contributed to my sister's life deeply. My sister, beautiful sister, who did pass from breast cancer years ago, and your mother helped extend her life. So there's just a tremendous giving and receiving and blessings and miracles really between our two families.
Truly, truly, truly. I love that. Yes, yes, yes. It's so special. Um, I would love to know, how did you even get into the Enneagram, or
Mm.
how did it get into you? I feel like I should be asking. How did that start for you?
You know, it's so amazing because if somebody had told me that there was a personality typing system, is the way that they might have talked about it, that I should look into, I would have probably just ignored it, because my experience of love and my experience of presence and my experience of wisdom and consciousness and awakening is that it cannot be put into a box. It doesn't want to be too prescriptive, and certainly not just psychologically oriented. I've been very interested for many years in the intersection between a healthy psyche and awakened consciousness. So, but it turns out, I will tell you two things about it. The brief thing is that the Enneagram's origins were not anything about personality typing. Way back to ancient Egypt, we are finding the Enneagram symbol, the hexad. We find it in the Greeks. We find it in the Desert Fathers, who were devotees of Jesus. It came up through into modern times and through the Jesuits, and then was rediscovered in a way through some psychiatrists and psychologists and just people that were interested in growth. And really what the purpose of it always was both to show us how each of us in very specific ways forgets who we really are and
Mm,
distracts ourselves to be looking at and experiencing life through a fear contracted way of being, and also to remind us of, if you will, consciousness. You could also call it God or love. is way bigger than our temperament is usually willing to or able to see. So what happened for me was that I had already been, through grace, experiencing so many awakenings, such a sense of coherence inside of myself. We had already developed a very profound and deep consciousness school here in Maryland, where we were committed to doing the kind of depth work that one would usually have to go to, like a Tibetan monastery or a Christian monastery, or just somewhere where you were going to immerse yourself in practice and in self-development and in surrender to a power higher than yourself. And we had already developed so many ways of people coming to our school and having experiences that ordinarily would have taken them years, and they'd have to move away from life, and we were committed to them doing it in life. So what I would notice, though, was that people would have these awakening experiences and have radical shifts in consciousness, deep healing of their psyche, wounds, core wounds that were really had seemed intractable to people would suddenly release. There would be somatic changes, emotional changes, cognitive perceptions changing. And I would notice, we used, by the way, meditation and inner inquiry and breath work, and that is one of our main modalities, and movement and chakras, and just really also a kind of emergent way of working with each person individually. I would notice that even when people would have these tremendous awakenings and shifts in consciousness that you would think would last, that somewhere between 5 seconds later and 5 hours later, or 5 days later, maybe if they were lucky 5 weeks later, it would seem like something almost unconsciously from within their psyche would come up and take the very realization and the very embodiment that they had had and start to use it for its own purposes, which appeared to be like what they had realized, but were actually just slightly slanted, coming from a place, again, of fear. And so I would have to go in again, and we'd work again, and we'd get a few more steps. But I just knew that there had to be a way to circumvent this co-opting of awakened consciousness. And I will never forget the day when someone mentioned to me about the Enneagram, and they just started talking about 2 of the points, or 2 of the types, as we call it. And I knew instantaneously, this is an ancient map that tells us the precise way that we limit our perception of the absolute, of God, of love, and 9 particular ways, depending on our temperament, that we forget who we really are and start to posit a separate sense of self from the rest of life, who's going to create the life that we want, but from a place of fear, instead of receiving everything that we are and everything that we want is already here, and then crafting a life out of that. And I was just thrilled, because I knew that this was the cognitive underpinning of all the pathways that I'd been having to work at so painstakingly. And so indeed, over the next few years, with that knowledge, I noticed that students could catch themselves in the act when they go into these states of awakening, and then they knew how their particular temperament was going to start to skew or co-opt the energy, the amazing transcendent energy of this awakening for its own purposes, and they could circumvent that, and we could create practices that released their somatic patterns, their emotional patterns, and their cognitive patterns from doing that. So that's how I came to the Enneagram. And I would say now that powerfully, what I've come to understand is that this is potentially a methodology and understanding, a theory that can be applied to any realm of human consciousness endeavor, whatever other kind of modality, spiritual path, religion, inner inquiry, that this is the missing link of what it is that finally really dissolves completely that sense of separation between ourselves and the beloved, if you will, where our ego is thinking we have to be the love, we have to be the power, we have to be the radiance, we have to be the depth, we have to be the clarity. And we can actually see how we're resisting the fact that all of those qualities and more are already here. And what is it to receive those and then craft a life out of that?
I love that. And it makes me think about something that I think is commonly talked about in, let's say, the therapeutic world, just the world of therapy or psychology, even in coaching, this idea of self-sabotage. And how, despite some of our greatest efforts, we can derail just about anything depending on, I guess, where we are in our process.
Yes.
How does the Enneagram speak to that?
It's a beautiful question, Katy. So, our wounds, which we all know we have these wounds, some of them are situational from our life, somewhere between our conception and where we are now. We experience different things and they cause different particular wounds. Some of them are kind of more spiritual core wounds where we just have felt separated from the source. And those wounds are so painful that we will create defense mechanisms, as you know, compensating mechanisms to not feel those anymore. And so in order to free up our life force, to be able to develop our true self, we are going to have to, as you know, experience, in a sense, or not reject or resist the places of pain inside of ourselves. And that's so very hard to do. Secondarily, we've developed these coping mechanisms, and actually, either consciously or unconsciously, we can have a sense of shame about them because we know they're not the real thing. We know that we are operating from places of envy, judgment of others, lack of compassion for ourselves or others, selfishness, if you want, although we can certainly transform that word. We know that. And so looking at what Carl Jung would call the shadow, which, by the way, is not only the dysfunctional parts of ourselves, but also the beautiful light that we hide. But looking at those parts that are in pain is so very hard, and we have so much unconscious and conscious judgment of ourselves and a sense of shame that we don't do it most of the time. We do little tiny bits of it. Our culture certainly doesn't encourage it, so it's something that we have to seek out healers and places, and it's not just endemic to our way of life. The Enneagram, from my experience, and again, it's a universal language. You don't have to be any religion, any spiritual path, any other holistic modality that you do. It shows you just the blind spots that you're having within that system and shows you your greatest capacity. The Enneagram offers, in my experience, the most compassionate, objective understanding of why we have done these behaviors, like completely non-pathologizing them. You can understand that you've done it completely from fear, and you can see why in a very specific way. And you can have such compassion for your pain. I have seen couples, for instance, who had been on the verge of divorce because their pain in relationship to their partner, what kept getting brought up, and how they kept perceiving their partner seemed intractable. And literally, just by learning about their types and what is the source of their pain and why they're doing the particular behaviors they're doing, within a half an hour to an hour, it was like after 20 years, they weren't going to get a divorce anymore. And then they could start to build from there. So yes, I would say the Enneagram is incredible in terms of dissolving this self-sabotage, because you are now in a place of open-heartedness and clarity about yourself that can face even the darkest or most distorted behaviors that you have.
I love that. And so if I understand correctly, are there 9 numbers?
Yes.
Yes.
So the Enneagram is based on what George Gurdjieff called the law of one, the law of three, and the law of seven. And here is essentially what it means. And for people looking at an Enneagram symbol right now, or if you happen to look it up online, you'll see a circle. And then in that circle will be a triangle. And then over that is a hexad with these sort of open, these lines that are connected but open at the bottom. Now what this means is that the law of one is that there is only one. There is only one. We all came from the Big Bang. Cells of my body, the cells of your body, the air that I breathe, all the galaxies, all the universes, they all came from the Big Bang. So there is only one. And we all are a holographic image of everything else that exists everywhere. We're a holographic entity, if you will. However, or in addition to that, that one is capable of infinite expression. And the way that it expresses itself most fertily, we often think of things in dyads, like masculine, feminine, light, dark. And of course, those things are true. There are, these different expressions that can seem like polarities even. But that's the problem. That's kind of a static way of looking at it. The truth is that whenever you have two things, you also have a third thing, because you have something that's arising between those two. And the Enneagram completely understands that not only is that true, but to live in that means that you will never get fixated in a particular way of being or a particular stance, because you'll understand that something else is always true about the opposite, and there's an emergent force that is a surprise and that we don't even know about. So it's like the Holy Trinity in Christianity. I mean, you can just name so many things. Hinduism, Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu, Christianity, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. We could just go on and on about the number of creation stories that understand the intrinsic triadic nature rather than dyadic nature of the first expression that comes out of the one, or the fact that we're all one. So that triangle represents the three centers of intelligence: somatic or kinesthetic intelligence, the body; heart intelligence or emotional intelligence; and cognitive intelligence, and the head center. And off of each of those centers, there is also the birth of three things. And this is how you get the 9 points. You get, let's just say for the body center, you have what we call point 8, 9, and 1. And for the heart center, point 2, 3, and 4. And for the head center, types 5, 6, and 7. And these represent, or are actual understandings of the 9 different temperaments that human beings have. Now, here's a fascinating fact about this. So this is ancient knowledge that's been adapted and sent forward and utilized in different ways, and particularly by people like the Desert Fathers around the time of Christ, who understood that these were 9 pathways to God, and that unfortunately our temperament only wanted to do one pathway, and we would do it at the expense of the other 8. And therefore it would not only be imbalance, but our ego would be getting involved in like how we perceived ourselves and God. So with these 9 types though, and these 9 ways of being, if you will, interesting that in the 1970s, 2 psychiatrists called Chess and Thomas, who had no knowledge of the Enneagram, did a study of human temperament of babies, and guess what they found? 9 basic temperaments. And those temperaments were discovered by Dr. David Dan. I mean, he read their report. He was a psychiatrist at Stanford, and he knew the Enneagram, and he was just blown away because they matched exactly the descriptions of not only the personality challenges and difficulties, but also the potential and the gifts of each of these types, what we might call the awakened consciousness of each of these domains. So I think the Enneagram is probably, for me, right at the top of the list of things that can dissolve the self-sabotage piece of our lives and can open us to a greater understanding of all of the parts of ourselves that we've been missing, so that our greatest gift can be stabilized in a fully awakened consciousness that is all aspects of consciousness, all aspects of God, rather than a kind of distorted version because we're sort of lusting after the one gift that we carry so deeply into the world.
I hadn't framed it that way in terms of, being able to utilize the other different potential paths or opportunities. I took an online quiz like probably a year ago, and it said that I was a 2 with a 3 wing.
Mm.
Um, Someone on here, Leah, she's saying she's a 4. Do you have like a little? I mean, I don't. We
Yes.
don't want to take the whole day, but do you have a little
Yes.
nugget of each type?
Yes. Here, let's do this because I do see some people are writing in and saying that they are really loving to hear this and needing to hear it. And I think that if we can hear a bit of ourselves and a bit of our loved ones and a bit of our colleagues and bosses, and we can start to understand why this could be so powerful. So I want to apologize that I am going to do it in kind of a sound bite, not something that I would usually do. You know, the study of the understanding of the way that we work based on our temperament is profound and deep, and it would take hours to download. But the moment you start to understand it, you can start to celebrate your capacities, and you can start to interrupt yourself from the patterns that you usually do, and you can start to open up to all the other 8 types. So what I'll do is for each type, I'll talk about their greatest gift for a half a minute, and then I'm going to talk about what happens from the ego point of view with their temperament and how they get off track, okay?
Great.
So we're going to start with type 8 if you happen to be looking at the Enneagram symbol, because our experience, many of us as teachers, is that the new consciousness that's trying to happen is not about leaving the earth or being out of our bodies. It's about being the lived love, the lived consciousness, that's actually the expanded cutting edge of God, if you will. So we need to start by being in our bodies, like actually getting that we're here. So we're going to start with the body center. And the body center is at the top of the Enneagram, point 8, 9, and 1. So we'll start with that. And type 8 is remembering, or they have a deep, I should say something. There's a biological basis for all of these temperaments too. We don't believe that this is from upbringing anymore. Upbringing will affect the level that you function at. But there seems to be some kind of both genetic and, just an initial from the very beginning on growth in the brain and other things that we're just beginning to understand about these temperaments. So type 8s are most able to contact and remember the infinite power of the universe. They are so aware that if you want to use the words like Shakti, Ki, Chi, life force, the force that was talked about in Star Wars, They are so aware that the isness of existence, the fact that, that there was the Big Bang, that everything just is, and that it's filled with infinite energy. They know that God is that. God is power. Life is power. And what happens, and you will see this with eights. Eights come into a room and it's just like, bam, they are so there. Now, their heart, like any of our hearts, feels tremendous grief at the separation from that energy, or the perceived separation from it, which is caused by our collective consciousness and the way people are afraid of power, the way people misuse power, the way people are not living in what we would call immediacy and aliveness and confidence and empowerment. And so what the eight does is they decide that they're going to be powerful, and they're going to make sure that they're never not powerful, because their heart is yearning for that level of aliveness again. So an eight becomes domineering, commanding. We call the wound that they have creates lust, if you will, like a lust in their heart for bigness, for great things. So they come into a room, it's like, hi, and if we're going to drink this drink, we're going to have 3 of them, and and in order to keep generating that level of aliveness, which is not true aliveness, by the way, so we have to remember this, they're generating a false sense. The true aliveness is here right now, and we could all learn to relax into it, and we would become extremely potent and extremely alive. But the eight's going to make sure the aliveness is in the room, and they're going to have to keep pumping things up. And so what are they going to have to reject? Vulnerability, softness, weakness, as they perceive it, in themselves and in others. So they armor themselves against their own feelings, against their own needs. They have contempt for that in other people. And so this is why an 8 can seem like a very cold, domineering, controlling, bombastic, dictator when they are at their worst. But if we can begin to understand that all of that is a desperate need to bring the aliveness, to remind all of us that there is a level of aliveness that we've disconnected from, then we can begin to understand 8s, and they can begin to relax and discover that it is actually by understanding their own needs and others' needs that they will be able to empower the world. A good example of this would be like a Martin Luther King Jr., who we theorize was probably an 8, Nelson Mandela. These are people that could feel the needs of the people, but stand in the aliveness of and confidence that would allow them to take immediate action, like faith can move mountains. The 9 part of the body center has to do with understanding that all of that aliveness, all of that power, it's still all one. So no matter what action would be taken, everything would still be connected. It would be unified. There would be a place of unity. And for that reason, in order to have the full aliveness and the full somatic intelligence, nothing should be rejected ever. Wow. Everything should be embraced. The 9s of the Enneagram grieve because they cannot understand why the rest of us don't see that everybody has a place at the table, that everybody should get along. They don't understand, because they are so clear about this state of unity and oneness and home, and that everyone belongs. And in fact, in their greatest manifestation, they are the most amazing love, glue for everybody, and mediators, and you will feel so warm around them. However, in the grief of feeling disconnected from that, they will decide that they have to bring the peace instead of that the peace is already here. Even if this incredible breakthrough happens, it's connected to this small, tiny pond, so everything is still in a unified field. Well, they feel such sadness that we don't understand that. They decide they will be the peace themselves, and that means they have to avoid conflict. They have to avoid asserting themselves. They have to avoid having any needs or wants. They have to not even say their opinion most of the time. I mean, they really will kind of blur themselves out of existence. So if you're in a room with a 9 and you'll be going like, where do you want to go to eat? And the 9 will almost always say, wherever you want, you know, or they'll be trying to read what you want and kind of go with it. They have an incredible capacity for disappearing. They feel very unimportant at that point because they haven't been developing themselves. And they just kind of get blurry and out of existence, and they develop their own inner world that they live in where everything's okay. But it's not really okay. Because their gifts are not actually coming into the equation. And that's just a very brief example of a 9. So a 1, which is the other part of the body intelligence, 1s know that because this vast infinite aliveness and power, and because it's all unified, it's everything belongs, everything is connected, that it all deserves blessing, that it's all sacred. And the 1s and it's bringing, all of these types bring tears to my eyes because the nobility is just so incredible. The archetypal piece that each of them is holding for us all is so beautiful. And the 1s of the world know that our life could be sacred. It could be completely holy, and holy in both ways, holy as in Holy and also Wholy. And they know that this is actually the case. And they look at something and they see what it is and its greatest potential, and their whole body, because it's body intelligence, galvanizes to support that wholeness and that holiness and that sacredness. And so what their heart grieves is the separation from that, you know, that people are not living in that our world is not living in that. And the unconscious decision that they make is to utilize their temperament to bring the goodness back into every moment, to bring the goodness back into every situation. And so what that means is that every cell of their body is like riveted to like, what's the right thing here to do? So unfortunately, what happens is they start to divide the world between right and wrong. And they become the ones who are sort of telling the rest of us, here's what you should do, and here's what's right, and here's what's wrong. And they become like the judge of everything. And it is true that when a 1 is in an unhealthy place, you will feel like you're being judged. Now, of course, they will tell you in their vulnerable moments, don't you know that when we're judging you, we're just trying to help you be the best you can be? And that's what their little heart is crying about. But they become very armored, similar to the 8, and they have to reject and put into the Shadowlands their own mistakes, their own foibles, their own, not being perfect. And so they start to want to be perfect all the time. And they reject any possibility of imperfection, which means that they cut out a whole part of their creative self and sort of the beautiful fertility of the chaos of life and what it could produce. And these are such brief descriptions, my friends, but giving you a flavor.
That's why you have classes, which we'll talk about later. But
yes, where we go into in depth. Yeah. So we move into the heart center and emotional intelligence, and we first encounter the 2. And the 2 is remembering most readily through their temperament that not only is everything sacred and one and alive, but it therefore is worthy of being given whatever is needed to blossom into its greatest self. And the 2 is sometimes called the giver. I like the term the lover, They are so attuned to the deserving of love of everything. They know that the universe loves everything that it's produced, in a sense. They know that everything is an emanation of this one. And they know that it's possible that we could all live in a field of love, which includes qualities like attunement to one another, empathy, nourishment, nurturing, and even more than that, I want to say responsiveness. In fact, I like to say that love is the fearless and unrelenting commitment to respond to the need for awakening in ourselves and the other in every moment. So the two knows that we should wake up and be ourselves, and what can I do to help you do that? What can I do? They decide they're going to become the love. That's the mistake that every type makes. They decide, I'm going to be the power. I'm going to be the peace. I'm going to be the sacredness. I'm going to be the love. Well, that's not how it is. There's no separate I, and that love and power and sacredness and all the others is already here in everything, and you know, in God, if you will, consciousness. But the two decides they're going to bring the love. So what do they have to reject? They have to reject their hardness. They have to reject not being sensitive to others. They have to reject even their own needs, because they have to be constantly paying attention to what do you need in order to feel loved. And so they become highly cathected towards the other, the other, the other. What are you feeling? What are you needing? And how can I help? And so what is rejected is an actual feeling about their own development, their own body, their own heart and mind. And a lot of times we find twos later in their life had a great talent, like art or mathematics or whatever, but they have spent so much of their life taking care of others in beautiful ways, by the way, absolutely astounding ways, that nobody will love you like a two, but that they've forgotten about their real gift that wanted to be given. And it's so beautiful to watch a two finally get in touch with that. And so some people can find twos a little invasive at times, because the two is like leaning in all the time to the other instead of coming back into themselves. But like all the other types, when they can dissolve this sense that I need to do it, but instead that the beloved is doing it through me and through everything, and I also just need to pay attention to my own feelings and logos and creativity, then it just becomes delicious, because they are very attuned. And it will be the thing of like, if you need something, the two will always be there for you, you know, and in just the right way. We come to the three. So what happens when that love is given and received, and there's a deep nurturing, is that we do become our most radiant self. We can grow and be that, you know, gift that we are to the world. And the 3-point represents that. It represents the personal gift that each of us brings to the world. It represents radiance. It is sort of like God, you know, takes light and creates something from it. It's like infinite energy manifesting in form, so that it's light, it's radiance, it's value, it's glory. And the 3 heart knows that this is true, and knows that we can function with this incredible light force and light speed, and that everything is so valuable and it can become its best self. And when their heart feels grieved being separated from that, what they develop is that I'm going to be the light. I'm going to bring the light, shall we say, back to the world. And where do they first notice light? They notice it in their parents' eyes when their parents are proud of them. So they do something, their parents go, oh my God, or the other caretakers, you know, like, oh my God, and their eyes light up. So the 3 becomes almost addicted, in a sense, to getting people to light up in their presence, to feel excited, to feel proud of them, to feel admiration. And so a 3 will take all of their energy and they will try to excel and be at the top of whatever it is that they think, whether they're a waitress in a restaurant, or a CEO of a company, they're going to be the best, and they're going to be efficient, and they're going to move with light speed. And indeed, they're amazing. All of these types were all amazing. And threes can light up a room, and they can inspire people, and they can move really efficiently. But the shadow here is that what they have to ignore at that point is what their own heart wants, because they're doing it for their parents. And in fact, we've seen often that threes will take on a career that is the lost dream of one of their parents, like they're trying to heal their family. By the way, we all love our parents so much, even if we think we don't, and we do try to heal our families. Threes in particular will try to live out the lost dream of one of their parents. And oftentimes you won't even know that was the lost dream, but if you do an interview, you can find out. So they have to, they just have to not relax. They can't move slow. They have to be in a constant state of action. And they don't really know what their own heart wants because they're living out this other dream. And so they can become very insensitive to other people, but also sort of like stepping on top of them, not giving credit to others because they've got to be at the top. They've got to go for that light and that, being admired. And so some people will experience them as extremely narcissistic, and many people will actually, when they're in their unhealthy place. But again, if we understand why they're doing this, and they can start to interrupt that pattern and bring the real radiance to life and become everybody's biggest cheerleader, like seeing what we're all capable of and giving us amazing ways and understandings of attaining our goals. The four, the last heart type, is the one who remembers most strongly that aspect of consciousness and love, which is the endless depth. And it's really the original primordial substance of God itself. It's like the deep beauty, the deep fragrance, and the endless depth and mystery of this. And what they grieve, so this is where you get your beautiful, poets like Rumi and the great mystical poets. They're reaching for that depth, that effulgent, ephemeral, almost you can't taste it, but you can. And they know that that's what we all really are. That we're all stardust, that we're all the origin story. And what they grieve is the desecration of that, the forgetting of that. And so they decide, I'm not going to settle for the mundane. I'm not going to settle for the rejection of this. I'm going to go for that incredible effulgence and that incredible depth and mystery. Well, in life, a lot of times what is deep for people is when they are feeling dark, when they are, a lot of times when people are just happy, we live in a very shallow culture. How are you? How are you? But when somebody's suffering, then everybody gets a little deeper, right? So the unhealthy four part develops kind of an attachment to suffering and an attachment to darkness because it feels more real to them. And they're trying to go for let's go to that deep place again. And so they decide they're going to be unique. They're going to be different than this mundane world. And they, they can be very, they decide to have an identity. Since we've all forgotten our original identity, well, they'll have a unique, different identity than everybody else. And they will love, just the way the sunlight comes through a window, and then be just so upset in a way that everyone else doesn't see that, or that everyone else doesn't see the beauty in the cow dung or whatever. They just develop this way of being that is highly unique and oversensitive, and really actually lands up separating them from the real depth that they actually want. And so then we come to the head center. Now, this is important for our Western audience because I think that as we've adapted the Eastern teachings to the West, we have misinterpreted the no mind clause of the Eastern teachings. We think that no mind means our, and sort of getting out of these busy thoughts in our head means only coming from our heart. But if you look around the universe, the brilliance of it, the brilliance of matter and gravity and white holes and dark holes. And if you think about how incredible it is when somebody discovers, a planet or the cure for a childhood disease or how to build a house. It's like, isn't it exciting, friends, to know something? Discovery is like a kick. Unfortunately, because of our educational system, a lot of times that doesn't work for everybody. Just my microphone there. Our educational system doesn't work for all temperaments. And so some people really thrive in it, but others don't. And the whole thing of being graded, being judged, it actually shuts people's awakeness, intelligence, awareness down. Well, the head center is just as important. You can think of it as the mind of God, the brilliance of existence. We couldn't have created this human body, Yeah. So the head center gives all of us the opportunity to awaken to our potential of intelligence. That's going to be different for each person. And type 5 reminds us that everything can be known. Type 5 is most connected to that part of consciousness that is just awake. It's just aware. And it's not in fear of seeing whatever is there. There's like this incredible clarity of here's this planet, here's this love, here's this hatred, here's this atom. And it's like the 5 knows that there's a brilliant map to the universe, to existence, to consciousness itself. And it is thrilled into the clarity and awareness of that. And what the heart of the 5 grieves is that the rest of us don't see that, and we turn away from it, and we create very small maps, and we become afraid of looking at certain parts of reality. And so they decide that we're a ship of fools, basically, and that they're going to figure this out. They're going to figure out the map again. And so what they do is they become the observer. They step back from life. They kind of cordon off their emotions. They become very cerebral, and they try to watch and figure out and study and learn and categorize things, so that, because the thought that they have unconsciously is, if I can figure it out, that will be my gift to everyone. So 5s can seem very cold to people, very non-feeling. I've actually found the opposite. I think their hearts are so incredibly tender that they almost don't dare to open them, because they feel like they wouldn't be able to function. But the 5s of the world are very brilliant, brilliant, but also very giving, if you really stop and notice it, because they're constantly trying to feed the rest of us bits of information. Unfortunately, they've usually contracted the world that they're trying to find out about to be some small part of reality. And what they have forgotten is that they need to be in contact, like physical contact, with all of reality in order to have the real intelligence. But a very funny story that I'll tell is, it's not uncommon for a 5 to be like, okay, well, I need to learn how to cook. And so then they go to the library and get a book. Or I need to learn how to play tennis. So they go to the library or go on the internet and start reading about it. And the question is, are they ever going to inhabit the world so that the real intelligence of all 3 centers can come to them? Type 6 is the head center that understands that if we are aware of everything, and since we know it's one, it means that we would actually be awake to how to navigate ourselves in our own lives and in the lives of everyone we love, and in the universe, so that everything works optimally. It's kind of like they understand that everything's a mandala and that it's connected, and that there's a kind of optimal way of everything dancing with everything else. And that just like if you're in your home and you know where everything is, so you know how to move, if you get that everything is connected and you're really awake to it, then you'll know exactly how to move, and other people will know how to move. And so it's this sense of incredible guidance about how life would unfold, an incredible inner guidance and wakefulness. And their heart really grieves the loss of contact with that. And so what they will do is decide that they're going to figure out the guidance system. So instead of trusting they are part of the guidance system, they go outside to find an authority figure, a belief system, a person, a methodology, 12-step programs, which are fantastic, by the way, but I'm just giving an example, a religion, a science, again, a person who they believe has the answers, has the guidance, has the truth. Now, they don't actually trust anyone because what they've lost is the ground of knowing that they themselves are the guidance. And so they're going to have some backups. They're going to have one authority figure or system, but then a backup and then a backup. And we like to say sometimes they have this plan A, but then there's a plan B, C, and D. And part of what happens is they start catastrophizing. They start imagining what the worst could be so they can plan for it, so they can get that guidance going so that they're never caught off guard. And sometimes what they do is actually second guess their inner promptings, the things that they really know to be true. They will second guess them and not follow them, and then they'll act impulsively instead. But when a 6 is at their very best, my God, they're like your best friend. Different than a 2, but there's a similarity. They're there for you, but in a way that you can be yourself and they can be themselves. And they know exactly when to be with you and exactly not when not to be with you. And they're just like, it's just this delicious dance of optimal well-being, which brings us to type 7. And type 7 understands that if all of this is true, and it is, it means everything's possible. It means that we are living in a universe of endless possibilities and generativity and creativity, and there's just abundance. We could create anything we want. And so they remember that aspect of God, the Hosanna, the hallelujah, the hey, here's what could happen. And their heart really grieves the loss of contact with that. And so what they decide to do is to be the joy. They're going to be the joy. They're going to be the exuberance. They're going to be the possibility. And so what they have to reject is the stillness in themselves. What they have to reject is the deep mastery of being with any one thing. Because they have to create abundance, and they have to create experience and sensation. So they're always like, well, I can go experience this, but I also want to experience that. And I want to experience this, but I also want to experience that. And it keeps them from ever fully committing. And of course, until they get out of this pattern, it keeps them from ever fully committing to the absolute mastery of something. So we can sometimes say they're like a jack of all trades, but a master of none. But they are so committed to bringing joy and happiness to themselves and others that, they can really just be like a spark plug in any setting. And of course, what they're denying is their own sadness, their own grief, which keeps them from going deeply into their greater capacities. What I have found, though, is that even a slightly awake 7 has more capacity than anybody else to go into hell with people and help retrieve those people from hell, because they know this causeless joy that is existence, this causeless generativity, this unconditional joy. And they can bring it even into the darkest of places. So that is, with deep apologies to everybody, such a brief taste of the 9 types. And just want you to know that within the map of each type, what you will discover is the great gift, which I would probably speak of half an hour on the gifts of each type. Then the core wound and what the suffering is, and then what we call the passion, or the comes from the Latin word passio, which means the suffering, like what suffering is created in the heart, the shadow, what they have to reject, the fixation, which is a mental habit that we all create, each of our types. For instance, the 8 objectifies people. The 2 thinks that everyone needs this certain kind of love. You just develop these, and that it's not okay to say what I need. There's these certain mental habits that begin to develop. Then there are the instinctual drives, how our self-preservation instinct, our sexual instinct, and our social instinct interact with our dominant type. Then there is the understanding of the virtue of what happens in our heart when we are able to let go of these patterns and let the heart not be in a quivering state of fear and become, the heart that it was meant to be. And then there's the understanding of the awakened mind center for all of us, where we become one with what we call the holy idea, which of God. God has these 9 different perceptions of how life is, or these 9 different ways of understanding or creating reality. And then the essence, like what is the essence of that type? So these are all different aspects. And there are other things too that we study and understand about our type and how we can remember who we really are and embody it and live from it.
I've got a watch party going and this going, and on the watch party we have some people going, oh my gosh, this is makes so much sense. This is what I think I am. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a lot of light bulb moments going off here. So what, you're pioneering, you're sort of moving the needle forward with the Enneagram in your own way. What is, you've just explained very beautifully, and I know it was short in the scope of the work. What the different types are. Where does your aspect of it or your work come into it?
Mm. So because I am so grateful to the wisdom of the Enneagram for how it can help us unlock these, as you put it, self-sabotaging ways, but also unlock all the dimensions of reality so that we can stabilize our greatest gifts, and instead of them being like peak moments, be constant, going in every moment of our life. I've wanted to help unlock an even deeper way of understanding the Enneagram from a wellness model, of working with the Enneagram from a wellness model, from a holographic model. So what we do with working with people is we go in through the doorway of essence and we show people how even their behaviors that are so destructive to themselves and others are actually a reflection of their gift. And what this does is it so releases, the Enneagram's already a very non-shame based, although I can say that people use it that way, and it's terrible when people say, oh, well, you're a this, and that's
Right.
a terrible thing that people can do to each other. But the truth about it is that you can understand how the darkest behavior is an attempt to get back to essence. So the way that I'm teaching it now, and have been for years, is from this essence perspective. I'm now calling it a holographic perspective, where every part of ourselves is a reflection of our greatest essence. And so we actually then become more fearless and willing to see these parts of ourselves that appear to be dysfunctional or ugly or whatever, because we know that a piece of our essence is in there and we want to recover it.
I love that. And is that, you have a class coming? I mean, you have several classes
Yeah.
available, correct? Can you tell
Yes.
us a little bit about, what your classes are like, or what's available for people who want to study this more?
Well, right now, the current course that's going on is online, which makes it very accessible for people. I
Mhm.
also do in-person trainings, but the holographic enneagram.com is what you would go to, just all one word, the holographic enneagram.com. And that is a 13-week course that gives a download of the whole map for each of the types and each of the points, and gives experiential exercises using breath and movement and inner inquiry and inner dialogue and writing and practices that I give each week for you to try at home, and in your workplace and everywhere that you go. And these are video classes, although you can listen to them audio. And also you get the whole written transcript if you just want to read it. Now, the holographic Enneagram, as I said, we go through each type in a very deep way, and then the experiential practices that go with it. And we also have an introductory session that explains all of the terms of the Enneagram, and a final session that is where we're all just going to come on and share and ask questions, and two integration sessions in the middle of the course where I have 5 Enneagram coaches who are very multidimensional people using many different modalities, who are able to come on and answer questions as well. I also answer questions during the live classes. So the holographic Enneagram is something that you can register for up until August 25th. The class actually began a week ago, but it's through the Shift Network, and registration is open till the 25th, and you're going to receive all of the recordings, all the video, the audio, the transcripts, and the coaching. And I want to say I'm just so grateful, Katy, because the Shift kept the cost of this particular course
Mm.
way under what they would usually do. And we did that out of a celebration that we had just done a 5-day Enneagram Global Summit where we had like 40 teachers talking over 5 days about different aspects of the Enneagram. And we had almost 40,000 people from all over the globe tune into that summit. So I asked them if they would keep the costs down, and they said yes. And on top of that, we have a lot of scholarships available. So I totally urge people, if you'd like to study what your greatest gift is and how to embody it in your life by looking at the parts of the higher parts of yourself that you have rejected through your temperament, and you want to be able to interrupt your behavioral patterns, this course is an amazing learning community. The people that are on it already are just so willing and so awake and so compassionate.
That sounds amazing. And so they can find all of that at holographicenneagram.com.
Yes.
Perfect. I'll make sure that that's posted. And I hope that everyone heard this, that there are scholarships available. So if you're concerned about money, you don't need to be. You can get all the information at the website holographicenneagram.com, which again, I will have posted. Well, Jessica, this has been amazing and just such a valuable conversation for so many people.
I'm really honored, first of all, Katy. I totally admire your work and your dedication to the world. And I love our connection. And I'm honored that you've taken the time. And I really have to say to people, long before I ever found the Enneagram, I was already having experiences that, you know, unconditional love, aliveness, wisdom, all of these things I lived in India for 6 months. I was in an ashram for 4 years. I studied psychology. I was going to go to medical school. I had the arts. There were so many things, deep meditation practice for 10 years. I am telling you, the Enneagram is a beautiful nutrient for dissolving the egoic orientation that we all have, even towards the spiritual path, and really giving us true liberation. And you can apply it to anything else you're already doing.
I love it. I love that. I think that's amazing. Well, thank you. I know based on the comments, a lot of people got so much out of this. So I'll make sure the information is there. Thank you again, Jessica.
You're totally welcome. And if anyone has any questions, they certainly could ask now, or maybe even just send you the questions and we can reply to them later.
Yep, absolutely. Because this will be active. The show will be active, and I will keep sharing it out. So
Thank you so much.
thank you. And thank you everyone for watching and hanging with us. Please share this broadcast if you think that someone else might get something from it. Just share it out, share the love, and let's get people learning more about this body of work.
You know, it just gives my being so much joy, Katy, because I think of everybody who does listen is going to listen to this, and that each of those people has a circle of influence. You know, each of those people has a ministry, if you will. Every person, they have people they touch and affect every day. And I won't be able to touch those people, but they will. And when I think about the compassion, the increased cooperation, the increased co-creativity that can happen with people when they understand this wisdom. You know, people are using this in business, they're using it in churches, they're using it in families and communities, of understanding how each of the types is bringing a gift and how each of us could develop all 9 gifts. And it just, I think of everybody listening, I just want to honor you, because you are the ones that are going to make a difference.
Yeah, carrying the torch. All right. Thank you again. And hopefully we'll get to do this again another time.
It would be an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.